let's finish this up on CHOP because there has been a class action suit filed. You sent it to me beforehand. I read through it quickly. I'm going to have to, I mean, this is going to be worthy of a separate video because I like a standalone vlog, just because there's a story being told in that lawsuit, which win or lose, this is one of those lawsuits where the people drafting it just wanted to tell their story to the public and they want the public to know what's going on. You want to explain the situation for the people who may not know?
Sure. So I think it was a response to a super chat in our last session. Someone asked about the possibility of bringing a claim. And what I said is I thought that you could try to bring a due process claim, but it's tough because there's no right to protect unless you can show conspiratorial collusion with the city. But I thought they could possibly bring a public nuisance claim. So that's what they brought. They brought a combination of due process and public nuisance claims. So that is consistent with it. And the best thing they have going for them is the idiotic mayor of Seattle constantly bragging about her complicity in what was going on, saying, oh, this is just the summer of love and whatever else nonsense she was pitching. She didn't realize she created liability. Now, all of a sudden, the lawyers had the grounds to say, this is not just a matter of a duty to protect. This is a matter of the city deliberately promoting, colluding, conspiring, aiding, abetting what is taking place here. So what wasn't a substantive due process claim, what was not a procedural due process claim, became one. Because their argument is, hey, the city made a decision to take away our property, but they didn't give us notice or a hearing, and that's a procedural due process claim under the 14th Amendment. In addition, we have certain fundamental liberties to exercise our business. The city decided to strip it from us by promoting this Chaz group, and that will constitute a substantive due process claim. And, of course, it's also a public nuisance. But the due process claims allow them to go to federal court and bring it under 42 U.S.C. 1983, which allows for a fee-shifting provision. And then they did a great job of detailing the complaint. Some people were irritated that they were politically saying, we don't oppose CHOP, we don't oppose this and that. And Chaz, they're doing that because they're in Seattle. So they know they're going to get a lot of judges from that side of the aisle in all likelihood, and jurors from that side of the aisle. So I wouldn't have taken that path, but they chose to. So c'est la vie on that side of the aisle. But they wanted a broad section of businesses to be part of their class action. And their point was, then they go through the great detail of how crazy it has been in that zone, that all these mainstream media narratives of, oh, this is not a big deal, this is all fine, this is all kosher. You know, people like Will Sommer at the Daily Beast, or people like Gerald Holt at the Right Wing Watch, we're trying to pretend this was not a big thing. The Oliver Darcy at CNN was trying to say, you've probably heard this crazy story about a lawless zone in Seattle. Well, that's just a bunch of exaggerated theory. Well, this lawsuit shows how much they lied in what they put out there. Their information was false and misleading. So I think it exposes the left and the media for trying to cover up just how bad this was, because this lawsuit details it in great detail. And many of the people suing are politically aligned with the left. So that you can't say it's a politically motivated suit, because clearly it's not.
It is amazing because it goes through the general context, but then it goes through each of the, I think it's 4 or 5 stories. It's hell on earth. It's like one thing to have bad neighbors, but it's another thing. One of the petitioners can't get their internet repaired because nobody's going in there to fix their internet. They're talking about how public parks have been turned into effectively like gardening zones, but not
often open sewers.
Open sewers. I was going to say like gardening on the one hand, but people doing their business and feces and everything all over the place. It's hell on earth. And they've
graffiti, property violence. You step outside, you're at risk of personal violence. It's Escape from New York in live time. They just moved it to Seattle.
And there was it's amazing. So they detail the stories. They go into detail about these 5 very, very upsetting stories. I mean, you imagine there's real people there. It's not just words on the paper. Then
many of them vulnerable and elderly.
Yeah, and they get into the due process, but they did bring up 2 interesting claims under the state law. One of them was I don't have it in front of me, but it was a unlawful gift.
That part was interesting. I saw, and there's legitimacy on that. That basically all of the claims except nuisance. Though with nuisance, they went after the city, claiming the city was now creating the nuisance, which I thought was a smart claim based on everything depended upon the ability to claim the city was knowingly involved, to be intentionally complicit, to establish liability. But they have the mayor on record, so they're good to go there.
No, it is amazing. The unlawful gift is basically that they're saying the city gave
Yeah.
people who are undeserving. They basically gave something to someone without any lawful reason.
It was that they took my property and gave it to the schmuck over there, and the schmuck over there wasn't entitled to it. They didn't give me any procedural due process while it happened. And by the way, it hasn't turned out well.
It is. I saw on civil losses you might have to cover the Chaz chop. You have to. I mean, you have to. Everyone should read it. And if I can do nothing more, because I'm not a master of the law as relates to the law, just to summarize it and to highlight the passages that people need to know, because it's the kid's coming back downstairs again, and I think my wife is going to go crazy. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story, and it's not being told, and it's everything you would fear when the fundamental rules that you've grown accustomed to break down in society. I mean, so you read it. It's interestingly drafted. It's creative. What do you think? How do you think it's going to go? You could obviously motion to dismiss.
The whole key. Well, they'll get to discovery now, because I think the hard part with always bringing the suit is that there's no duty to protect, and they've limited the terms of substantive due process and procedural due process to make it very hard to sue the city for something going wrong by private actors. But here, because the mayor has been on the record so many times praising and protecting it, she took Trump's bait repeatedly. Trump clearly wanted the debater to say dumb stuff, and by golly, she did. And so now that it's going to be like the San Jose suit that Harmeet Dillon brought, where those protesters got Trump people got pushed into protesters who violently assaulted them. And normally you can't bring a suit for that, but there they deliberately structured the exit route to make it more likely that they would be physically assaulted. And that's why the suit went forward. And then the mayor had said some dumb stuff a couple of days leading up to it. So here the mayor said far worse. So they have clear evidence of complicity. They'll get to discovery. That's going to be embarrassing because of the internal emails, commentary, and other stuff. There's going to be dumb stuff. There's going to be, my guess, by the police captain's statements. I mean, because the police, she was been very upset about this the whole time, giving up the precinct, was mad about it, was very public about that, was willing to risk public attention related to that African-American woman who was willing to do so. So, there's going to be a lot of police reports and other information that's very embarrassing to the city that shows the city's knowing culpability and complicity. So I think they're going to have to settle and write some big checks.
Which is the ultimate irony, is they're going to write checks from the coffers of the taxpayer dollars. They're not going after anyone personally for this, nor could they, I imagine.
Yeah, they don't know who they are, really. So you could sue like 55 John Does or 200 John Does. There's the one head guy you could sue, the chief warlord of Escape from L.A., Seattle style. For people who don't know, Escape from L.A. and Escape from New York are two great movies by John Carpenter. And A Modern America kind of looks like Escape from New York. But I don't think that would be very profitable. I mean, trying to serve all those people. That's why I always thought it'd be tough. You could bring a nuisance case and try to force the government's action, but the benefit to them is the statements of the mayor are so clear they can allege collusion, complicity, and deliberate indifference, which is the substantive due process requirement, and here intentional complicity, in fact, in creating a public nuisance because she wanted to make showboat in front of Trump. And so it's another place where Trump's Twitter has allowed a lawsuit to happen that probably would not have otherwise happened because the mayor took the Trump Twitter bait.
But no chance of going after the elected officials, the mayor, on a personal basis, on the basis that what they're doing so far exceeded their mandate as government officials?
That they made it impossible to sue for anything that relates to duty to protect. They basically say there's no duty to protect unless the person's effectively in your custody. And so I think they've done too much of that and letting the cities off. It's all based on the myth that the king, that our leaders were appointed by God and thus can do nothing wrong. That's where sovereign immunity comes from. It's a created doctrine by the government and particularly by the courts to cover for their complicit brethren in other departments of government to not face responsibility and accountability for their actions. But it's the law of the land as it currently exists. So your only real ability to go after them is where you can show culpable knowledge that this was intentional and directed by their behavior, that it happened because of what they did. The city's defense here would be basically a causation defense. That, look, this happened. We didn't create it. We didn't really try to protect it or promote it. We actually did try to reduce it. It was just the reality of the situation. And, it's like living in South Chicago any given weekend. There's only so much we can do. That would be their defense. The problem is the mayor said too much enough to get to Discovery, and Discovery, my guess, will be even more embarrassing, enough that they'll likely write a check, and the taxpayers will foot the bill for the craziness of this experimental country in the middle of our country.
All right, well, that'll certainly be. They'll vote with their. I guess they'll vote them out if they they'll vote with their dollar, so to speak. Nicholas Rome says, Mr. Barnes logged off before my question could be answered last week. Are we seeing a modern day equivalence of SDS to the Weather Underground organization movement of the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, well, the fact that they had tied a board member to the organization that was connected to BLM, who was part of a even more radical organization, was part of an active actual communist organization that was trying to blow up buildings and other things, also might have been connected to the famous Brinks robbery. The fact that she was connected to all of this and sat on a critical board suggests that it's something even more dangerous than Weather Underground. Weather Underground at least tried to limit their bombings to property, try to avoid killing people. That they did not succeed. But, they were actually less radical than I think some of these groups, definitely less radical than Antifa. And Antifa would take it much further if they could. And I think some of the other groups that are connected to this would take it much further. So it's more like the Shining Path of Bolivia. That would be the movement to look at a little bit. And they don't have the power of the Khmer Rouge, but they have some of the mindset of the Khmer Rouge or Mao's China. It's a much more totalitarian mindset. Weather Underground was more targeted, deeply problematic still, domestic terror organization. But they were much more targeted, and as was the Students for Democratic Society, which these days I can't see Students for Democratic Society without remembering the Big Lebowski, him sitting there smoking pot and saying, no, he wrote the first, the authentic SDS document. The second one was a cop out. So that's all I can think of. But I recognize, but so it's the same mindset, but even more dangerous potentially. Now, most of these people are kids that are involved in this, so their connection to criminal operatives under the criminal element, criminal gangs, is essential to their degree to escalate the violence. And organizing the violence will be more difficult, but they come from the same mindset mentality, except much more dangerous mindset-wise than the Weather Underground.
Okay, amazing. And now, Tony Nieves, I missed the super chat. I thought I brought this one up. It was a joke about Trump, chances of Trump releasing Area 51 info on his way out the door, maybe his nephew to the system. It's funny, I missed there was some sort of Twitter back and forth between Trump and his kid about Area 51, but I didn't get the full details of that exchange.
Nor did I. It would be great. It wouldn't surprise me to see Trump, whenever he's finally leaving office, for him to declassify tons of stuff and just release it to the world. I'm hoping that happens. Everything connected to the Kennedy assassination, whatever else is out there, just dump it on, give it to everybody. Let the world see what's going on. But whether he does it and whether they let him do it are two separate matters.
Oh, if he decided to do that, is there a recourse to prevent the declassification?
Nothing legally. It would be extra legal remedies.
Okay, let's move on from that right away. Skylar, the creator, says that Raz dude assaulted a man and handed a rifle to a possible minor on camera. Do you think he'll get jail time? Do they know who that person was? I'm not trying to. I don't.
If it's the guy that there's some very disturbing history of the guy that was identified as the first warlord of the region. I think that's who they're referencing. There's disturbing connections to a wide range of behaviors, films that are deeply problematic, other behaviors that are problematic, potential arms running that's problematic. So I'm sure there's a lot there, but the only people who will probably prosecute that will be the feds. I don't see the city or state doing anything given their attitude and demeanor and disposition to date.
Rico Time says Matthew Christ.
You could definitely. It's going to be tricky. Rico was designed for what it was not designed. People think Rico is designed to go after the mob. Actually, kinda. Rico was designed to deal with when the mob took over a legitimate business. So it wasn't meant to deal with the mob as an organization. It was as what happens when the mob infiltrates a dry cleaning business, a laundry business, a waste management business. Not saying a lot of waste management businesses have mob ties, or that limo driving businesses have mob ties. Just put that out there. For that kind of infiltration. So it wasn't really. I've done civil RICO cases. Got the first major civil RICO case against a law firm in the history of the country done, and got it past summary. Got all the way to trial before finally that case settled. So so RICO law is much harder than it looks Now they tend to be real liberal with it and interpreting it for criminal purposes, but I think it's going to be tough. Antifa is like not a real organization; it's more of a loosely knit, cells that are connected to. It's organized like Al Qaeda. It's not very organizational or hierarchical, and so it's meant to be that way. It makes it much more effective. It's more of a shared sense of ideas and shared training methods. And that's really what it is. Less organizational than the Klan even. So I think it would be tough to bring a RICO claim, but not impossible.
Excellent. What do we say? Should we wrap this up?
Sure. If there's any more.
Yeah, we'll give time for some questions. I think we covered everything that was on the table and more. You think the CHOP lawsuit is going to get to discovery unless it settles? The question is going to be, did the plaintiffs bring this as a question of principle where there's going to be no monetary settlement that they will accept or no adequate amount that can compensate them? So actually, the question from my end, they're bringing it as a class action. In the States, what's the difference between a class action and joinder of lawsuits of multiple plaintiffs?
All it is a joinder, except it's a joinder where you don't have to name all the plaintiffs. So if you get a class action certified, it can be for like 10,000 people, and they're never joined formally, but they get to join in the remedy. So they're not necessary. So they're not named parties who are subject to the suit. They are only subject to its remedies if they opt in. Most of them get a chance to opt out. The only other legal action I was thinking of was the state of California. A judge in the state of California did a reverse version of, like, there was the preemption claims. Now there's the claim that the legislature brought that what the governor is doing, I think it's involving the mail-in ballots and masks, whether or not he's usurping his legislative duty through the executive branch in a court in California, one of the smaller counties. They brought the case in the right place. The smaller counties in California are not nearly as to the left in the interior of the state. The state's really two states thrown together these days culturally. Said that, in fact, Governor Newsom did, like Wisconsin, did in fact violate the provisions that the governor's basically acting as a legislature and he doesn't have that prerogative. So it's good to see that happen. And I know there's more people looking at more lockdown suits as these mask regulations go in and as they're doing a second round of at least quasi-lockdowns. Governor of California today announced a bunch of bars are going to be shut down in a bunch of counties, similar in Texas and maybe in other places too.
Okay, excellent. We got two more super chats here just at the end. If California 209 to remove affirmative action amendment passes, would it go to SCOTUS? Any chance of it actually taking effect if voted in 50.1%?
The attempt to, basically the attempt to make it legal to discriminate against race will not be constitutionally affirmed. So the attempts in California to actually make it so that you could legally discriminate based on race would violate the 14th Amendment. So it will not, their attempts, if someone, they can change the law without it becoming a constitutional problem. But once somebody believes that now they can discriminate, that will in fact lead to a legal action that the federal Constitution still protects.
Amazing. And we got Kelly Graham. Thanks again, gentlemen. Kelly, thank you very much. And Jay Mill. Sorry for the repeat. What would happen to everything Durham related if Trump loses indictments, ongoing investigations, etc.?
It'll go bye-bye, just like Durham's investigation into the CIA spying on Congress went bye-bye. So Durham has a questionable history. He's done some good stuff in the past. He did help clean up Boston related to everything that happened up there involving the famous mobster. But he was very questionable in what he did with the CIA spying on Congress. So we'll see if he does anything and what he did vis-a-vis Guantanamo. So I think we'll in torture and whatnot. So hopefully he does something more here. There's been a lot of big talk so far, little action. Hopefully there will be action, but time will tell.
Okay. And now that I remembered before we end this, I don't remember what state it was in. I think it was Oregon, where they mandated face masks but had a racial exemption.
Yes. So I mean, that's clear. It's a form of discrimination, effectively. And so I think it'll be subject to suit on federal civil rights grounds. The Oregon's sort of been leader going nuts about a lot of things. So there's the sort of the lockdown related suits. There's the mask or what you could call COVID related suits, whether it's economic lockdowns or speech limitations or access to the ballot or the mask issues, and in some cases discriminatory application. And then there's the issues related to the riots and the looting, which will the Chaz case is a case that a lot of people will follow because all of these politicians that went along with some of this activity in some of the cities, counties, and states where it occurred now may be subject to suit because of their complicit behavior.
And it's amazing. I mean, that story is going to be the next, like, not to look at it in a opportunistic way, but like the Flynn saga was eye-opening in terms of everything that went on with the FBI. This is going to be eye-opening in terms of policy decisions and a government basically letting its people down. It's going to be something to follow.
It's a fascinating era for the intersection of law and politics. I mean, just in 6 months, we've gone through an impeachment that was unprecedented for a first-term president since Andrew Johnson, then a pandemic with a political reaction we've never witnessed in American or Western legal history, the modern era, and then a scale of riots and looting and these separate little zones that we have never experienced at this scale in America. So who knows what's next?